All right. Whoa, that was quick. Wi-Fi's quick today. All right. Welcome back, Bleeding Blue. It's been a while since we have had an interview, and this is our first Giants interview with the one and only Dan Schneier. Dan, how you doing today?
What's going on, Justin? Happy to be here and greet this podcast with hopefully some knowledge, but who knows? Who knows what I got in store today?
And then, of course, David __ Powis is also here. Dave, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. I'm really happy that we have somebody else with some knowledge finally today, because I'm tired of just being me. So I appreciate Justin, having two people coming at him with knowledge today. It will certainly make my life easier. Wow. So I appreciate it, Dan.
Shots fired already. I got it. I see what kind of podcast this is going to be right now.
That's all this podcast is. Now the reason why we kind of clash heads a lot, Dan, is because Dave's a big Eli guy, and and if you know me, if you kind of recognize me from Twitter and some of our interactions, I'm not exactly the biggest fan. So we have some pretty intense conversations.
Yeah, I thought nothing could split this fan base quite like the Odell Beckham Jr. situation last offseason, but apparently it appears Eli Manning has split the fan base even wider, and I get it. This is, in my opinion, the greatest player to ever play for the Giants franchise, and I know some people will debate that and say Lawrence Taylor, but I believe that Eli Manning was more important to the franchise's success individually, and that's weird to say because I do think Taylor is the best player of all time, but that just goes to show how important it is in my mind to play at the quarterback position. But there comes a time when you realize that when you start to think, can fans separate the player they're seeing now with the player they remember? And that's kind of I think where we're at with Eli Manning.
Absolutely. So Dan, we have you on here not necessarily to talk Giants concretely, because of course you can follow Dan. He writes for 24/7 Sports, CBS Sports. You can follow Dan on Twitter. Why don't you plug that really quick?
Yeah, sure. You guys can find my work on Twitter at Dan Schneier NFL, DANSCHNEIER NFL. And if you want to actually read all my work, you can just head over to 247sports.com and click on the Giants tag, or just download the CBS Sports app and hit the Giants as your favorite team. You'll see most of my content there as well.
Awesome. You also write for Pro Football Focus for fantasy football.
Yes, sir. On the fantasy side, I cover fantasy for PFF for a long time. That's how I got my start in this. So,
and of course, Big Blue Banter. If you want the best Giants podcast for delving into the X's and O's of the game, and in the words of Pat Kerwin, he had a book a few years ago called "Take Your Eye Off the Ball." If you want kind of like that X's and O's analysis, Big Blue Banter, in my opinion. My humble opinion, it's the place to be. So if you want to find out some, Dan's opinions, all that stuff, you can follow him on Twitter, podcasts, writes a lot. Awesome guy. And a lot of you will probably already know this because you're here and you're listening because you want to hear more about Dan. So what I want to do and what we really want to structure this interview is to be about you, get to know you more, your journey, maybe some more macro conversations on like maybe your opinions of football, maybe more of just as a sport and some other stuff like that. So first, Dan, tell us about your journey as a media member in sports. Did you always want to do the type of work that you're doing? Did schooling help, growing up? So tell us a little bit about your journey in media.
Yeah, Justin. I mean, I've always been interested in writing, and sports has always been my passion, but it wasn't actually a route I decided to take once I enrolled in college at the University of Madison, Wisconsin-Madison, and I actually enrolled in the journalism program. But there were two sides of it: the broadcast and print journalism side, and then the advertising, media, PR side. And I was always told, you can't make a living in the broadcast print side anymore, which it may or may not be true in the long run, but we'll see. And I decided to use that pressure, and it shaped my decision to kind of go the advertising PR route. So got my 4-year degree, graduated, and jumped into the working world in advertising at a video advertising agency. And I was there for a year, and I hated it. It got to the point where I would wake up every day just devastated to go to work, which is never a good feeling. And part of that was obviously, influenced by the commute, which sucked. But, at the same time, it just wasn't for me. I didn't have a passion for advertising and video advertising. So meanwhile, around the same time, I started writing my own blog. And I eventually, my work got picked up. Basically, I guess the easiest way to say this is it got picked up by people let me push back real quick because I forgot an important part. Earlier in this, while I was still working at Videology, the advertising company, Chris Wessling, who used to be at RotoWorld, I'm sure you guys are familiar with RotoWorld, fantasy football website, put out a feeler on Twitter, like, we really are behind on our RotoWorld Twitter account with social media. And so I just emailed him and I said, look, I can turn this account around immediately and I can get, more followers, more interaction. Just give me a shot. I'll work for free. And that's what I did. I got started early at RotoWorld, just doing social media behind the scenes.
Wow.
And eventually from that, I leveraged that into a position with Pro Football Focus Fantasy. Obviously, he's with ESPN now. And so I started working for Pro Football Focus, where the great thing about Pro Football Focus is they don't, they're not worried too much about clicks and they're not worried too much about page views. And they just want strong, solid football analysis, which is really what drove my passion for this career. And so through that, I was able to put together a lot of good work, a lot of strong work. Doesn't have any crap in it, no reports, no speculation, nothing like that. And from there, while I was doing this while still working at Videology, and I started my own blog, which was on the Giants and on the NFL, away from the fantasy side. So eventually, there was a job opening at Fox Sports to basically start by just doing email campaigns, daily email campaigns, and then from that, I got that gig, and from that, I leveraged that into a full-time position writing for Fox Sports. And at the time, Fox Sports had a digital writing side. This was about 5 or 6 years ago. And from that, I leveraged that into running a section of Fox Sports online digital called Fanhood, which was basically I was in charge of 12 NFL writers, 2 per division, and there was one of that for each sports division. Unfortunately, Fox Sports made the decision to pivot to video and then get rid of their digital writing entirely. And around the same time, I actually considered it a blessing because only a few months later, I got a chance to work for 24/7 Sports. When I applied, there were 2 openings. There was one to cover the Broncos and one to cover the Giants, and it felt just perfect for me to have an opportunity to cover the team that obviously I grew up following. And since then, I've been with them for now 3 years, and I really enjoy this opportunity and everything it's brought for me. And it's been interesting to see what happens when you go from following the team as a fan to covering the team, and just how it affects how you see things and how you view the games, even something as simple as that. So that's kind of where my journey led me, and that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, that was actually going to be our next question about were you a Giants fan growing up, and if not, what team did you root for? And it's so funny hearing that you come from a background in advertising, yet you have this extensive knowledge. That's something that I don't even feel like you hear players talk about. Like I said, delving into the X's and O's and the intricacies of the game that the average person just doesn't know. Again, taking your eye off the ball and seeing what's going on, and not just seeing it, but knowing what's going on around just where the ball is going and how the game football is played. Your ability to see that is incredible, in my opinion. So, but yeah, so you mentioned you were a fan of growing up of the Giants, right?
Yep, grew up as a Giants fan. Who's your
favorite player growing up?
My favorite player growing up for most of the Eli Manning years, so I'd go with Eli Manning.
Okay.
Classic.
Yeah, David.
Classic. I love it. I love it. I mean, I feel like we're all from like relatively the same era of Giants teams. So I feel like anybody in this generation of people is Eli Manning. He's got to be your favorite. There's no way. Got to be.
I mean, I'll always stand by, where we're at with Eli now is a whole nother story, but I'll always stand by. Eli could have actually been even a lot better with this franchise had they not run him into the ground with really bad drafting for 11 years for the most part. But yeah, drawing back to what you said earlier, actually, Justin, I did think what you mentioned was interesting. And really what got me so, I guess, passionate about the NFL was 2 things. And you mentioned them both. And the first, or you mentioned one of the 2. The first is the X's and O's of it, because to me, football, some people, football excites them because of fantasy or because of the drama and the storylines or the players they like to follow and become big fans of individually. But for me, it's always been about the fact that football is a chess game. It truly is. There's 11 players on both sides of the ball. They're both moving in different directions after the snap, before the snap. And really, there's so much more strategy than the average fan realizes. And sometimes that average fan who doesn't maybe not, is not accustomed to reading about or learning about the strategy and the X's and O's and the chess match of the game, when they start to hear it and when they start to learn about it, they become addicted to it as well. And that's something I've noticed since I started covering this team. And that makes me truly happy when I see people interacting with me and asking me more about that and telling me things about, the podcast that we do, Big Blue Banter, which is pretty much just a true X's and O's dive for the most part. And then the second thing for me was always the salary cap, because I think the NFL, and obviously the NHL is similar in this way, but the NFL is a very unique league in the sense that it really takes a lot more strategy, in my opinion, to be a general manager because of the hard salary cap. And because of how important the draft is, and there's 7 rounds versus maybe 2 in the NBA and only 1 that really matters, only 10 picks sometimes that really matter in the NBA. So for me, those 2 things got me so involved and so passionate about the game. And I really enjoy when I connect with people who follow my work or who read my work or listen to the podcast and start to really enjoy that stuff. And maybe they hadn't before.
I feel like this is a lot of question that reporters or analysts of a certain team get, especially when they grew up a fan of that team. How do you navigate, and especially covering Eli Manning and Eli Manning at this time, how do you navigate that fandom that you have or that you had growing up as a kid, but then also navigating that, like, okay, this is my work? How do you navigate those kind of feelings and those kind of roles in your life?
Yeah, no doubt. It's a great question. For me, the minute I started covering this team, I kind of put the fandom aside for the most part. I mean, obviously, it's not that easy to do, but I believe that when you really look at it, there's a lot more reporters out there who are covering teams they used to be a fan of than they'll admit, or than most people realize. But what I have noticed is 2 things. One, for starters, it's taken out, I view covering these games and looking forward to these games during the week a lot differently than I used to. I no longer really view them as a fan. But at the same time, I believe that part of the reason I've been able to build a strong following on Twitter, and hopefully with our podcast, which continues to grow, is because I'm not the average beat reporter or writer, and I don't believe that you have to be completely not passionate about what you're covering and try to be completely down the middle. I don't think that's the new age. To me, that's not what fans want. To me, there's nothing really forcing me to go in that direction anymore. I believe that, it's traditionally speaking, most people are like, oh, you should be 100% down the middle, but I'm fine getting passionate about some of the decisions this team makes one way or another. And I believe that that's part of the reason I've been able to build a strong following. So that's kind of where I see it.
David Powers.
Yes. What? Oh, you're putting me on the spot. I was not prepared for that.
I'm putting you on the spot.
All right. So you're talking about how difficult it can be to navigate the the fandom versus the job at hand. So where I think I've found this very difficult, especially as Justin and I have Justin started it, and he was gracious enough to let me jump on with him. Where I found it difficult to try to put the fandom aside and try to look at things maybe a little bit more, great, big picture, and a little bit less with my heart and a little bit more with my head, is in Giants Twitter. And obviously you're so intertwined with Giants Twitter and the mess that is Giants Twitter, especially on, it seems to be Monday afternoons during football season. So how do you navigate Giants Twitter and for Justin and I, we have it good. We can put something out there, have people look at it, ignore it, whether they do whatever they want with it, and then we can just turn Twitter off and just say, I don't feel like dealing with this right now. Like, too much negativity. This is ridiculous. For somebody who's a large portion of your job is interacting with the fans and kind of putting your content out there so they can hear it and they can critique it, for lack of a better term, and create a dialogue. Can it be difficult to deal with these, what we'll call them trolls, as they're so endearingly known? Is it difficult to deal with them? Do you just tune them out? Do you think they can create actually, productive dialogue at times? So how do you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about just the pure trolls, there are a few pure trolls. There's a big guy on there used to be a guy on Giants Twitter. I think he just keeps creating new accounts who's like was a big fan of John Jerry, the offensive guard, who was like the offensive guard, and I always kept talking about that and had like his whole shtick. He had like a bunch of shticks. Eventually, for those guys, I give them a chance. I usually interact with them once, two, three times, and if they keep just spewing nonsense, clearly trolling, or just not listening or to logic or any reason at all, I just mute them. And that's the power of Twitter now, the mute button. The mute button is the greatest thing. You don't have to block them, just mute them and you'll never see it. And so that's how I interact with just a very few. That's, to me, that's a very select few. I believe that some people who maybe consider trolls on Giants Twitter, I wouldn't consider them a troll. I believe they're just very passionate about what they believe, and they believe things are black and white. And I tried to make it clear on Twitter that nothing is ever black and white. And that's especially true with the Eli Manning situation, where it appears to me that, some people don't see and won't recognize and won't consider a gray area with Eli Manning. He's either the worst quarterback in the NFL, or he's the best quarterback who just needs an offensive line and just needs this and that to win another Super Bowl. And the problem with that is not the problem, but it reminds me a lot of the political landscape in this country. People are just not open to. There's some people who are just not even open to considering other possibilities when it comes to different things in life, and that's the same on Giants Twitter, I believe. So I just try to interact with them and just try to give a rational take to whatever they're saying, and that's all I can do.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like, Justin, we've talked about on this podcast before, especially throughout the season. It seems like every episode we have about a 10-minute segment dedicated to Eli Manning. No matter how hard we're going to try to keep it not about Eli Manning,
Hello?
Oh boy.
Looks like
oh boy.
David cut out for a second.
David, you cut out there for a second.
It's because I'm talking about Eli Manning.
It's because
Am I here?
Yeah, you're here.
Yeah,
you're here. You left off with I believe it looks like, but just like finish that thought. I can edit and use magic. Just
Digital
rephrase
magic,
your final couple sentences.
All right, yeah. So, we do have a lot of differences, but I feel like that's one thing we've talked about a lot, is the ability to realize that there is a gray area with Eli Manning. I don't believe that Eli Manning is still the answer and is just an offensive line away from being, a 4,500-yard, 32 touchdowns, 10-pick guy. But I do believe you can still be successful with him as your quarterback. He just needs a lot more around him than he might have in the past. So I think it's very important to realize that I think you come across a lot of fans on Twitter who do just want their point and their heart to be totally right. And there is no willingness to concede any little portion of that. So I think that's something we've talked about a lot on this podcast. But for sure, I think Twitter's a minefield these days at times. So I'm impressed with your ability, Dan, to like keep the trolls at bay, the ones that really just want to be heard, and also be very interactive and very reachable on Twitter. That's something I really do appreciate. So I just want to make that known, that's appreciated by common fans, the writers who are willing to interact and not just shut down ideas from people who only have like 70 followers. So it's appreciated.
Trust me, I appreciate that you appreciate that, because you know what, David, I think that, it's very funny. I was in, the Giants are an old school organization, and they really just like to limit the media access to those old school beat writers, I guess you would call them, whatever. I mean, I would consider myself that, but the newspaper writers. So, but I had a chance to get in this summer at training camp, and it's really interesting to be there and just see the lack of camaraderie, the lack of friendliness, the lack of it's just pure competition between the beat writers. They don't want to see anybody new in there. They always feel uncomfortable for where they stand with their jobs and whatnot. And I do get that because of the industry, unfortunately, where that's at. But at the same time, I believe that shouldn't, at the very least, that shouldn't extend to the fans. And I do see that a lot with some of the reporters. I think that's, I'm not going to mention any names or anything, but I do understand that feeling. And, that I've tried to be the opposite of that. I've tried to interact with as many people as I can on Giants Twitter for that exact reason.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of like our our current climate, our current social climate. And I think a word that you can kind of say is bias, right? Like Dave mentioned, like people either want their heart to be right, and they're going to stick with that. They're going to stick with their guns rather than seeing things kind of from an unbiased lens, where it's like you simply just want to see what's best for the team rather than you want your own opinion to be right. So one of the things that I've admired about you and the way that you really look at this through is you look at this through stats. You look at this through how players and how teams perform. And that's why, viewing the game from your lens of how is this player actually performing rather than your emotional attachments to somebody, that's how you evaluate them. And I feel like that's something that a lot of fans can't do. It's not something that I could fully do because, I just don't have I don't have the time or the means. I'm getting there. As I watch football more, but that's something that I really admire that you do, that you look at the performance aspect of it and then you form your opinion, as you really should.
Well, thank you.
All right. I wanted to ask you about, because you've been with Pro Football Focus. Have you been with Pro Football Focus since pretty much kind of like the beginning?
Not since the beginning of PFF, but since close to the beginning of when they started the fantasy side of it.
Okay. All right. Because there's been a lot of fans and a lot of different podcasts that I've listened to that have questioned like Pro Football Focus grades and how much can you really get out of a grade, especially when a football, a lot of it is, when the camera's not on you, or even like, let's say if Beckham has 2 catches for 10 yards, that type of performance could have just as much of a significance as to when he has 12 catches, 99 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So pulling a grade from there can be kind of tough. And what does that actually mean? So I kind of want to hear your opinion on the importance of stats in football and analytics, especially as somebody who's been there for over 6 years. Tell us your perspective and why they're important for fans to look at if they don't necessarily understand the intricacies of the game.
Yeah, I think like with anything in life, analytics have their place, just like game film, what we try to do, me and Nick over at Big Blue Banter podcast, have their place, but you have to, mix in both, and you have to take a little bit of both. And, there are a lot of things that through working with PFF for so long, there's some things that I've found are more predictive than others. For example, if a running back can force missed tackles at a higher rate and create yards after contact at a higher rate, he has a good chance of becoming the next breakout player at his position. I've seen this happen over and over with some of the guys who really stand out on a limited basis of snaps and carries and touches at the running back position from one year to the next. And now as far as you look at the grades, as far as the grades go, there are some drawbacks to PFF's grades in the sense that, okay, they may not. They don't know the assignment of every player on every play, which is a drawback. But I think you have to take, you have to look at it. You have to take everything. I guess the best way to look at it is there's different positions that, are probably easier to grade than others. For example, a cornerback, you can look at snaps, coverage, yards per route run, yards per snap. And that's a good way to find out how he's doing on the field. Offensive linemen can be a little difficult because they don't know the assignment. But as far as pass protection goes, you can kind of feel, as long as the defense is not running a stunt, you can see how well they're doing in their individual matchups. And Pro Football Focus has been very accurate if you look over the last 10 years at assigning grades to offensive linemen vis-a-vis what these offensive linemen are actually getting paid by NFL teams. And they match up, the big contracts match up very well with grades. And that could tell you alone, if you believe that, that maybe they're along the right track there. But like I said earlier, it really comes down to a mix of both analytics and game film. For example, Dave Gettleman is a general manager who believes that he sees something in offensive linemen that helps him evaluate guys who can take that next step at the next level. And in the end, when you're going from college to the NFL, and obviously the draft is eventually the be-all, end-all, in my opinion, in creating a successful football roster, you will not have long-term sustained success unless you win in the draft. And, he has a good track record of finding these developmental offensive linemen. And one thing you can't do is project college to the pros, because it's not just about the stats at all. And it's not just about the grades at all, because every single college player is playing different competition every week. And some of their competition is very vastly different than the others. So I believe that, again, it's just a mix of kind of factoring in both.
All right. All right. Awesome. So we're going to be mindful of your time. What we're going to do is we're going to do kind of two different things to kind of wrap up within our last few minutes. We're going to do some lightning round questions, which Dave's going to take that. Then we're also going to do a word association game. All right.
Good.
All right, David, you're up.
All right. So, they don't have to be that fast, but first thing that comes to your mind. Justin and I in our last episode we did a segment about our favorite Giants games of the last 10, 15 years, regular season games. You can include playoffs in this, make your life easier. Favorite Giants game of all time?
Well, including playoffs or no?
We can include playoffs, exclude Super Bowls.
Oh, exclude Super Bowls. If we're excluding Super Bowls, I would say it was the Giants win over the Falcons at home during the 2011 Super Bowl run when they won 24-2.
Yeah.
Just because I was there at that game with my brother, with my dad, with my mom. A rare occurrence. We never really got to go fully as a family. And I'd never seen a Giants home game at that stadium, at MetLife at least, as rocking, as loudly. And I think it was that moment during that season where it clicked, like this team could be very, very special. They were coming together at the right time. They were healthy at the right time, and they were playing really good team football at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. Justin, I think we were both at that game too. We
were both at that game, and there's something about those damn towels that makes everybody go insane.
Yeah, that was a really, really good game. One of the more complete games I think I've ever seen the Giants play in person. Okay, so we were going to say favorite player, favorite Giants player of all time, but we already heard you say it was Eli. So I'm gonna ask you favorite player other than Eli.
Oh, my favorite player other than Eli is Justin Tuck. I love what he stood for. I loved how he played both sides of the ball. I mean, both ways, run defense, and he was a pass rusher as well. He could line up at the tackle, at the end, scheme versatile. So I'm going to go with Justin Tuck.
I actually think I just saw it. I don't know if either of you saw this. Justin Tuck is a big behind the scenes guy for the AAF.
Yeah, not only is that, he's a VP at Goldman Sachs.
What, really?
Yeah, he's been there. He's working there for about a year now.
What does this man not do? Well, yeah, you could always tell, off the field, he's very well spoken. Really seems to have his act together. Okay, so funniest moment on the field during training camp.
I think it was when Curtis Riley. This was from last training camp when Curtis Riley and actually it was William Gay who got cut before the end of the season, but he was a veteran who was with them with the Giants during camp. When they would force each other to do push-ups every time, I guess they blew an assignment or anything went wrong basically in the secondary. And there was one point where there was a really bad play where they both kind of messed up and they both had to do the push-ups and they kept going back and forth and making fun of each other's form and whatnot. And it was a funny moment for the fans.
Dan, you don't have to comment on this if you want, but Curtis Riley, if that was a practice that went on for the entire season, Curtis Riley should be as big as Arnold Schwarzenegger right now.
Yeah.
Oh, but I started to laugh immediately after you said that because the irony in that, like every time Curtis, like you would think, okay, Landon Collins has to do push-ups every time he messes up a secondary assignment. Okay, so he's doing maybe like a decent amount of push-ups because everybody messes up every once in a while. But Curtis Riley, his arms would fall off.
Yeah.
Well, this podcast is very familiar with Justin's feelings of Curtis Riley, so if anybody is curious why he's speaking so candidly right now, just go listen, any episode of the last couple of months. Let's see. Most impressive player you've ever seen behind the scenes. So just like awe-inspiring, just the talent, oozing out of him, that maybe you don't even see on Sundays necessarily.
I think that would be Evan Engram. I had a chance to interview him and see him during his football camp. This past summer, it was in Passaic in New Jersey, and actually it was somewhere in Bergen County. I don't remember exactly where, but he was running drills with the kids and having fun, and just in person, he just has a really interesting body type. He doesn't look like a tight end, but he looks like a huge wide receiver. But when he gets going, he is so fast with that second and third gear. So to me, he was the most impressive person I've seen behind the scenes.
That's interesting. I feel that's not who I thought you were going to say, so I'm glad I asked it.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, so this is more to the Twitter end of things. So we'll keep this to Giants Twitter related. Strangest tweet or DM you've ever gotten?
I I had a guy who came to me with information that the Giants were targeting Davis Webb before the draft when they did draft Webb, and I didn't go with it because I didn't know who he was. He was claiming all this stuff, working friends with the Giants scout, whatnot, and then it came true. And okay, he comes back to me next year during the regular season with information that they were going to fire McAdoo. And I made the mistake. This is one of my biggest mistakes, I believe, since, with my career, of going with that information. And it was about, I guess it was like 6 days before the Raiders game when they fired him.
Mm-hmm.
So, from what he told me, and I trusted him because it wasn't the only person who I had heard it from. And so he was kind of like the icing. He was kind of like the icing on the cake because he'd given me something before I didn't go with, and other people were telling me this was going to happen. And, it was a matter of, 24, 48 hours. And I went with that, and I was obviously wrong. They fired him like 6 days later or whatnot. And it was just strange to me to have somebody come to me, with this information and for no reason. That's why the first time I passed and the second time I went with it, but I still regret having gone with the second time because I think in this business, it's important to have, like, if you're going to go with anything like this, you got to have 3 or 4 strong sources. And, obviously that's something that, you learn as you go with this.
Yeah, I can't imagine how difficult that is. I feel like if Justin came to me one day and if I was writing for the Giants and Justin came to me and said, I have this information, I'd have a really hard time trusting him. I don't know. I feel like I would have severe trust issues if I was a member of the media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have a hard time believing me too. I would probably just hear someone wrong because I have trouble hearing. I have trouble seeing. I'm a mess. I'm just a mess. All right.
Those are all the questions I got for you. So I'm going to allow you to take your thinking cap off. But this is harder in my opinion. Justin's game's harder.
Word association game. We're going to give you a player, a figure, something Giants related. You have to tell us the first word or phrases that come to mind.
All right.
We'll warm you up. Eli Manning.
Misrepresented.
I like that.
MetLife Stadium.
Terrible design.
Ben McAdoo.
In over his head.
Jerry Reese.
It's one word, or I can do a phrase.
Phrases, yeah.
Bad philosophy.
Matt Dodge.
Depressing.
Eli Apologists.
A bit out of touch with reality.
All right.
Bruce Springsteen.
Solid.
Odell Beckham Jr. trade rumors.
Stupid.
The University of Minnesota.
Safety school.
And last but not least, the 2019 Giants season.
Could be better than people think.
All right.
That's my favorite answer he gave. That's going to be great.
I don't think they're that far off.
Not that far off?
I don't. I mean, we'll see what happens at quarterback. That's going to obviously shape the season.
All right.
There's a lot of talent on this team. People forget.
What?
There's a lot of talent on this team. I feel like people just forget.
There's talent on the team, but they have they certainly have deficiencies on the defensive side of the ball, and they're not really getting above average quarterback play, which makes it hard to win in the NFL.
Actually, really quick, before we let you go, speaking of which, there's just a lot of talk right now because of the franchise tag day coming.
Yeah.
Landon Collins, where do you see that going?
They're going to I think they're going to do the exact same thing they did with Jason Pierre-Paul. They're going to tag him, buy some time to negotiate the contract, and then re-sign him for a long-term deal in August.
I think that would make the most sense. So I like the sound of that.
Definitely see that happening.
Yep.
All right, Dave, any other final thoughts besides Landon Collins?
Not really. Dan, I appreciate you coming on.
Guys, it was a lot of fun for sure.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's really like we've said this already in this interview, but I really do appreciate your dedication to Twitter, giving some people the time of day that other people don't. And I also appreciate your way of analyzing the game, not just being a talking head about it. You're actually analyzing it. It's appreciated. So appreciate you coming on, and hoping you do it again soon.
No doubt, for sure.
Dan, do you have any final thoughts?
No, nothing more to add.
Plug yourself one more time for us.
Yeah, so if you liked hearing this or want to hear more Giants X's and O's, go ahead and you can find me on Twitter at Dan Schneier NFL, DANSEHNEIER NFL, and be sure to follow the podcast on iTunes, Big Blue Banter.
All right, sounds great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. Once again, enjoy the off season, enjoy your time, enjoy getting ready for the draft, and that's all I got to say about that. So keep on bleeding blue, everybody. That's all you got to do. We'll see you with some more interviews, some Yankee interviews, some more Giant interviews as the offseason goes on. Go Yankees, go Yankees, go Yankees. Go Giants, go Giants, go Giants. Peace out. Have a great week.